Next up is Sam Riley Medlock, okay, who's going to give us a little bit more background.
How's everybody doing? Good. Good. Well, it's great to see so many familiar faces and maybe just a couple of new ones. But welcome to the third Gilbert F. White Policy Series. This is an incredible group, and just by way of a little bit of background on me, I am Policy and Partnerships Program Coordinator for the association, serving dual roles with both the Association of State Floodplain Managers and the ASFPM Foundation. I got recruited into this work pretty much right out of undergrad down in Texas, and will never forget the first presentation that I was giving at an ASFPM conference. It was on the Trinity River Common Vision Program, a pretty prominent flagship effort down in Texas that has been doing very well on the multiple objective management front. And I was gung-ho and all excited about it. Gave my presentation there at ASFPM in Austin, and an older gentleman approached me after that, stuck out his hand and introduced himself, told me that I was on the right track, and that man was Gilbert White, and I was hooked. I've been hooked ever since, and even though I might have gone off to do law school and other things, you never lost me. I'm afraid you're stuck with me. The last time I was in this room, it was made possible by the Nick Winter Memorial Scholarship that I had received that year that enabled me to participate in the 2007 forum. So I feel like in a lot of ways this has really come full circle, and I want to thank the foundation again for making me the recipient of the scholarship that year. I'd also like to just walk through what was the road that led us to this day, because it was a long road. We got some of the deeper history, of course, from Dr. White, but just leading up to this year's Policy Forum series, the first symposium on defining and measuring flood risk and floodplain resources, September in Gaithersburg, hosted by URS, the Risk Perception, Communication, and Behavior Symposium, the Roundtable on Natural Resources and Functions of Floodplains, all leading up to this afternoon's proceedings and through tomorrow. The findings of that first symposium were interesting. It confirmed a lot of what we already knew, that flood risk is a lot more than just property damage. It's also more than just life safety. Up to this point, we had been working to manage floods. Now we're moving more into managing flood risks, the probability and the impacts, but it's even more than that. We need to look not only at managing risks, but at managing resources. We concluded that flood risk needs to embody broader societal and environmental concerns, that there are also varying views and definitions of flood risk, that it's interpreted by each agency through the lens of their own mission. We need to acknowledge that. And we asked ourselves as a group at that first symposium, do we need a common understanding when we use the term flood risk or other terms related to it? Yeah, we concluded that would be desirable, but it's going to be challenging to get there. We did agree on these things, though. We have common desired outcomes. We all want resilience. We also are all looking toward a more fair and just apportionment of costs. As long as we continue to externalize the costs of choices around floodplains, then the people who make those decisions aren't going to be bearing the responsibility for them. The general categories of outcomes that we agreed we needed to be working toward included life safety, economic damage, societal impacts, resilience and recovery, ecological health, human awareness and behavior and responsibility. So again, it's about not just managing the risk, but managing the broader resource to get at this broad suite of goals that we're working toward. We also did the Roundtable on Natural Resources and Functions, and this really grew out of the kitchen cabinet informal gatherings that have been taking place at every ASFPM conference since I've been a part of it. And it's a great gathering of agency leaders, NGO leaders, and other experts on these issues. And what we concluded is that it needs to be more than just that annual kitchen cabinet, but we need to be able to come together and recognize that we have common goals that we can be building off of. So the idea being to establish an alliance of the NGOs, the agencies, and others that are all committed to protecting the resources and promoting public safety, and to identify the different opportunities that we hear about out there in our different sectors. Opportunities through policy development, even through budgeting, through the development of new regulations or new law and legislation that give us the chance to raise the status of natural functions and make them, if you will, co-equal with public safety and life safety and protection from property damage. And the roundtable was also geared ultimately toward developing an action agenda for just that goal. So for those that participated in that roundtable, keep your ear to the ground for more on that. The road leading to Symposium 2 led us to these conclusions. Flood risk can be presented as a suite of indicators, some of which can be numerical. And it's going to be part of our task in the next day and a half to really pick apart that goal. The keys are that it has to be accurate, it needs to be consistent, it needs to be complete and meaningful for users, and it needs to address not just risks, but also resources. In getting into the groundwork for Symposium 2 on risk perception, communication, and behavior, we were working off a pretty strong assumption. The way that we measure risk drives the way that risk is perceived, and that perception then drives behaviors. Really? Not so much. And we're going to hear more about this later from Dr. Maletti. But what we did learn at the second symposium is that risk information has little or no effect on human choices or on human behaviors. And evidence is bearing this out. Again, I'm not going to plow too much of the ground that Dr. Maletti will take us through in more detail. But this was, I think, a real eye-opener for a lot of us at that second symposium. And we have worked to get better and better information out there, more and more data, more and more precise maps, and give property owners and communities and states the most accurate information possible. And it has not resulted in a reduction in risk. In fact, it may have even served as a kind of a roadmap of how close you can get to that line. It hasn't been working for the vast majority of our audiences. It's too complex, and let's be honest, it's contradicted by the evidence that people see around them all the time, which is that government is ultimately responsible and will ultimately bail you out. So these are the changes in policy that we need to be looking toward to promote better shared responsibility. What we have also learned is that people are going to respond to frequent, clear, concise, meaningful messages that speak directly to them. They need to hear it over and over and over again. Repetition works, even if it's a really straightforward, simple message. We need to get it in front of them, and we need to do it over and over again.